Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in a very special episode of FFPC live draft coverage for the earliest time ever in the season. We will be broadcasting the FFPC Main Event, $1 million on the line, the flagship contest at the FFPC. It's July 5th. This is the earliest an online live main event draft has ever gone off. Thank you to the 12 drafters who are competing for that $1 million grand prize. We're really excited. Again, this is, I call it's the granddaddy of them all. This is one of the biggest contests in fantasy football. It is the best of the best play here, a $2,000 entry. Terp, I'm going to ask you, before we start, the FFPC main event, when you're drafting in it, how is this? Obviously, let's not even talk about best ball because that's a different format, but comparatively to the Fantasy Pros Championship or other maybe redraft formats that you do, how does the main event alter your kind of philosophy? How do you go in with the draft knowing that you maybe have a little more limited entries due to the price point of entry? I just wanted to hear
like
you as
said,
a main event player. Yes, please.
It all depends on the amount of entries you have. I mean, with the price point where it's at compared to the Fantasy Pros, which is 300 versus 2,000. That's a monster difference. You're talking about 6 teams to 1. So if you're a one main event team, go get your guy. You might look stupid. You might, people might laugh at you a little bit, but some of the guys who have won a lot of money in these contests are guys that, within reason, push their guy up a little bit more and it worked out for them. So a lot of it depends on how many drafts you plan on getting involved with. And my mentality is pretty much just draft my guys. I mean, if I'm spending this kind of money, and I will have multiple main event teams, it's go get your guy. I'm not really overly worried about value and ADP. That kind of gets thrown out the door, within reason, of course. Like I'm not taking, Jalen Polk in the 5th round. Like Jalen Polk, but that's just crazy. Like if you want to push him up around, maybe 2 if you feel like it, down there, go for it. But it all depends on the amount of teams you're doing. And if you're in a multi-entry, volume guy, you can mix up your exposures to get the guys, but you're still spending a ton of money. You're not just, if you don't like Puka Nacua, you're not drafting Puka Nacua in this format. You just call it what it is.
I think looking at the board, first round, I was looking at ADP. I actually posted about it on the FFPC Twitter. Obviously, this is the first online main event live draft. Slow drafts have been going on for about a month. And Bijan has been over the last month since main event open has been going at the 106, but he goes at the 103 today. And that kind of coincides with, in all formats, he's been slowly creeping up from that mid first round value that he started at. He's been going more and more. You see him as a top 3 pick, top 4 pick. Also, Garrett Wilson goes at the 107. He's been going at the 111. Justin Jefferson with a little bit of fall. He's been going at the 106, 107 in main event drafts, falls to the 109. At all surprised at any of the names that went ahead of Justin Jefferson, or is the quarterback kind of uncertainty and that offensive uncertainty making you understand his little fall to wide receiver 6?
The only question is maybe Garrett Wilson. I mean, obviously Garrett Wilson, we all love him. There's not many people out there that are going to say anything negative about Garrett Wilson, the player. But the situation, with Aaron Rodgers getting a year older, coming off a major injury, a lot of questions surrounding that team this year. Are they, ready to finally make that leap to the playoffs and make a Super Bowl run? He's the only guy that I think above Jefferson right now that is like, you're kind of like, maybe not. But nothing egregious. I mean, I didn't expect coming into tonight that there was going to be much egregious activity in these drafts. I mean, I'm sure we're going to see some things that are going to make you, laugh a little bit, but most of it I think is going to be pretty standard. I mean, a lot of these guys who are drafting in this main event live, I mean, these are veterans. These are guys who mostly know what they're doing. They know how to build a team. They know how to build a successful roster. So I expect it to be pretty by the book, which could be a little boring for some people, but we're going to talk a lot on this show about, how these teams are constructed, certain players and stuff that are picked. We're going to, if somebody makes a terrible pick, don't worry. I'm going to call it out. Just because they spent that kind of money, don't mean I'm going to let them fly.
And I would just say, we're not going to reveal, obviously, who's drafting and drafting where, although, little foreshadowing, we will have people, specifically one person, joining us, at about 9:30, who's drafting in this main event live draft to discuss where they're at, their strategy, and how they're feeling. So stay tuned for our special guest coming on. But this has been a really good draft room. I was looking at it earlier in the day, and this is a lot of names that I recognize, real successful FFPC players, names you probably would know if you heard them. So this has been a good room, and I'm excited, as you would expect. It's the first live main event draft of the year. I'm expecting it to be a pretty loaded room. We talked about it extensively on Tuesday for our Fantasy Pros Championship coverage, but kind of the rise of the tight end, I think with consistency, there's an occasionally a Mark Andrews slips to the third, but for the most part, you're seeing 5 tight ends by the end of round 2. I'm intrigued to see how that affects the rest of this draft if it pushes the tight ends like it did on Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, the tight ends, I feel like, in a main event type of format, they're going to get moved up. I mean, I don't think you're going to see many values at the position. These 4 guys, and obviously there's another one that should be coming off
Yep.
a couple coming off here soon. And I expect that to continue to rise. I mean, you will see, especially at the end of the 1-2 turn, with the McCaffrey Lamb drafters, it's kind of a little bit stale. I've talked about that before. I mean, there's guys obviously that everybody loves, but like there's the targets are, guys that all have questions. It's not a clear cut range. I think it gets a little better as the round goes on. So you're going to see guys like this drafter who drafted 1, pushed up Kyron Williams, who somebody's going to always like Kyron Williams better than me. So I'm fine with that. And then Michael Pittman, which is definitely, definitely going way high, go lower than he's going, that he just went in this draft. So he clearly liked Michael Pittman. You're spending this kind of money, go get your guy. I mean, do I think Michael Pittman is a reach there? Absolutely. But I have taken him? No. Like Michael Pittman, but I mean, you're drafting 1 and 12. Sometimes you got to get a little tricky with your picks to try to catch up maybe a little bit and get your guys a little bit more.
Yeah, Michael Pittman's been going at the 310 in the main event since the start of June, so it gets pushed up there by Team 1. Chad is talking a bit. Jonathan Taylor has been going at, trying to find it here, at the 202. He falls to the 207. I mean, I know you were a big ETN guy last year. ADP is pretty settled in that mid-third, but that's a really nice start there for Team 6. Amon-Ra St. Brown gets some value on Jonathan Taylor and then turns around and gets ETN. And I mean, this is, again, it goes back to philosophy. I know if you or me were drafting, it's then now you can really feel confident maybe pounding some receivers or going tight end over the next couple of rounds, as you should have your running back room squared away.
Yeah, exactly what you said is pretty much spot on. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, falling to this range is a sweet spot. I'm not the biggest Jonathan Taylor supporter this year, but I mean, we're talking about a structure of the roster, and with ETN, with Taylor, you're pretty much set in the running back room. You could pretty much be flexible, whether it's an elite quarterback, one of the tight ends if they fall, which is a possibility in the next round, or just pound receivers, because as you could tell so far, receivers are extremely popular and they're only get more popular as the rounds go on. So, you start off with St. Brown, one of the best in the game, Jonathan Taylor, who there's plenty of things to like about him this year. And then you have ETN, who we all know I love. So very good start by Team 6, I think it is 6. So
Yep, Team
well
6.
done so far. Don't mind that start whatsoever.
We've talked about him a lot as a guy that not a lot of people seem to like, but really interesting start. They just take Deebo Samuel, Team 11 there, AJ Brown and Saquon Barkley. That Eagles offense was elite 2 years ago. Started off hot last year, but sputtered down the stretch. Kellen Moore's there. We've talked about them a lot, but we haven't really talked about them after a team has taken AJ Brown and Saquon Barkley. We haven't seen that. We've seen Saquon Barkley slipping to the mid-second a lot. But I wanted to get your thoughts. I mean, I think that Eagles offense is going to bounce back in a big way. They miss out on Devonta Smith. I was wondering if they were going to snatch Smith up if he fall to the 402 or even take him at the 311. But just give me your thoughts. I mean, I know I always go to you. You're diehard, as everyone knows, Eagles fans. Saquon, obviously, a lot of people have issues with, but an A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley start and just banking on a bounce back for the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard for me as a drafter to take both. And I understand it, like, from a best ball perspective, like with Brown, Barkley, and then most people take Hurts. It's just the standard way that most people are doing it right now. This drafter didn't do it, but that doesn't mean that Hurts might not come all the way back because, quarterbacks are falling in these drafts. But the reason I say that in the main event draft is like your goal when you get to these shootouts, and obviously you got to win your league first, is to score as many points as possible. And I don't know, like you're kind of like, yeah, if Barkley catches a lot of passes, it's kind of a negative you want one of the the offense to either throw the ball a ton or Barkley to run. So it's like you're kind of mixed up a little bit what you want. So I don't mind it in a best ball format, but like in a main event thing, I just feel like I did it 1 year and like I don't know. It's just your margin for error is very slim, and if for whatever reason the offense turns into how it did at the end of the last season, which I don't expect it to, I expect it to be much better under Kellen Moore. You could be behind the eight ball in the weeks where you need big scoring weeks.
So we've been doing Fantasy Pros Championship drafts for the last almost over a month now. And I think we talked about it briefly on Tuesday, but it's really interesting to me to see this draft. I think Malik Neighbors was trending early third. I think we saw him one time in the second at one point. Fascinating to see him falling. Main event ADP for reference is 311. So the fall to the 405 is relative to that, but even just relative to what we've been seeing in other contests when he's getting pushed up to the third. Really interesting pick there. And honestly, Malik Neighbors in the 405 compared to where I think he's been going. And this is a guy who I think in all formats, that early third round ADP is going to become more and more common, especially when training camp starts to hit and you hear the sound bites and you see the highlights and preseason comes and he's balling out. So that pick at the 405 is going to look like a real value down the line, in my opinion.
Teammates, my favorite team so far. It's really hard not to like what they have done so far. You have Breece Hall, an anchor, start your team. Harrison, Ayuk, who I think I hope that he stays in San Francisco. They figure it out. He gets his money. Whether it's exactly what he wants or close to it. It's the best fit. We don't want Ayuk going anywhere else. I know people are saying like, oh yeah, give him with Jaden Daniels. That's a cool story and everything, but like, it's a rookie quarterback. There's still a lot of guys there that will, make it less interesting. He's the guy in San Francisco. I mean, he's a guy that put up all those numbers last year in game scripts that were most of the time not in his favor. They were in, a lot of games where the fourth quarter, he was just hanging out. So I expect him to open it up a little bit. There's some reports that came out this week that said San Francisco is going to throw the ball a little bit more. And Ayuk is a guy that, it's a little uncertain right now. It's a little bit risky, but he's a guy that I've been trying to target as much as I can in drafts right now because he should be going higher. He should be in the second round, in my opinion. If San Francisco is clear cut, he's the guy, he gets paid, whatever. And then Malik Neighbors, I mean, we know I love him a lot. I mean, he's got a ton of talent. There's only one downside you got to worry about, and that's the quarterback play. But they drafted him where they drafted him. There's really nobody else there. You would think that they try to get him the ball plenty. So in the fourth round, Malik Neighbors is a great pick.
It's actually interesting because the chat's saying, and I largely agree with them, not a ton of ADP variances. And I mean, I think that goes back to it's a pretty smart room that knows their stuff. And for the most part, the ADP, I think, does correlate with proper value. So no crazy reaches. There's been a couple of interesting, as I said, Neighbors is a little bit of a fall. Mike Evans, Michael Pittman going way earlier than they normally do. But there's a name here that it's not really by any means a steal or fall. He's been going at the 407, goes at the 411 today. We've talked about the Houston receivers early on in our live draft coverage. We haven't talked about them in a bit. We talked about Tank Dell. And essentially, the more and more I sadly, come off Tank Dell because of his injury, and I just not confident in producing at the level due to that based on historical medical history we're seeing with that tightrope injury. The more and more I like Stephon Diggs. We'll actually talk with him with our guest further. We'll bring it back up. But last time I had asked you, I think months ago, I believe your answer was, I want like whatever Texans receiver is going at the lowest ADP. Is that changed?
Or is it has still changed. Okay. It has changed because I did a little more deep dive into the Pollard situation last year versus the Dell situation. That injury is no joke. I mean, do I think Tank Dell, could break that mold and still have what he was looking like he was going to do last year before he got hurt? Absolutely. I mean, he's talented. He got a ton of speed. He's a game breaker. He's perfect for that offense. He has rapport with Stroud. But, I mean, Nico Collins is the guy that I'm leaning on more. He's starting to fall a little bit in drafts because of the uncertainty with all three guys. But Diggs is a guy that, like, I'm not really on. I haven't drafted him much. He's not a guy that I've been targeting a bunch, but what you're saying makes a lot of sense because if I'm betting against Dell a little bit, Diggs might be the guy. So, I mean, exposure-wise, I would say I'm going to be under the majority on Diggs. Nico will be the guy that I'd be over on this team.
Okay.
And from a Dell perspective, I mean, Dell's going to be – I'm not going to give up on him in best ball. I mean, he's going to be a guy that, I don't got to start him. So he's going to have his big weeks and hopefully, we mix them in the right, formula and get us to the championship there. But he's a guy that – from a redraft perspective, he could give you a lot of headaches. And if that injury is anything like Pollard with a slow start, we could be looking at, Noah Brown getting some touches or Dalton Schultz getting more touches. And also, obviously, Collins and Diggs reaping the benefits of it. So it's definitely something to watch. Collins is definitely the guy that I'm going to be on more. I feel like he got paid. He's has the reports, Stroud. Diggs worries me a little bit, but, I'm not going to be overexposed to him.
First real major, I mean, Pittman I think kind of was, but another major ADP difference here is David Njoku has been going at the 604, goes almost a round higher at the 505. The Browns offense, we've talked about Nick Chubb and kind of the risk taking him that I think every fantasy owner is well aware of. It's baked into his ADP in the 10th round. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, those pass catchers, Deshaun Watson is back off of his injury. Surprising offense down the stretch last year, obviously captained by Joe Flacco. Amari Cooper is holding out, and Njoku finished the year strong. What do you make of the Browns pass catchers? They added Jerry Jeudy. He's going in the 11th. What are your thoughts on Amari Cooper? He goes here at the 412, and then also David Njoku. What do you make of Team 5 there? Yep. Taking kind of an Njoku around.
There's two Browns that I'm targeting. I mean, if I had from a receiving perspective, Njoku and Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's a guy that I feel like in drafts right now, like you look at his name and you're just like, like you look at all the guys that are getting drafted around them and you're just like, I like Zay Flowers, he's explosive. I like George Pickens, he's explosive. Diggs is in a great offense. I don't know about Deshaun Watson. Is he going to figure it out? I feel like they're going to come back and Deshaun Watson's going to figure it out this year. I mean, Amari Cooper is a guy where he's getting drafted. You saw what he did. Obviously, it was a Joe Flacco, but he has that ability. I mean, he was an absolute monster and won people a ton of money at the end of the season. So, I mean, he's a guy that I'm going to mix in. I'll probably be even exposure-wise. From a main event perspective, he's a guy that can win you $1 million. There's not many guys you could sit out there and go, he did it last year. He proved that he can do it. So he's the guy in this offense. I don't want to hear about Jerry Jeudy. I don't want to hear about, Cedric Tillman, Elijah Moore. Yeah, they're serviceable guys, but this is an Amari Cooper show. This is an Njoku show. I expect them to target them guys a ton. Very, very solid targets for me and definitely guys that I'll be targeting in the main event.
Tight end kind of tonight look about where you think it should be. I mean, we have already 10 off the board in the first 5 rounds.
I think, this is as standard as a draft. Like most drafts we've done so far on these live streams, they've been pretty wacky. I mean, you just see some guys getting pushed up, some guys getting pushed down, some values popping up all over the place, But the tight ends, I mean, this is pretty much where I think now that these guys are going to go. I still think Kyle Pitts is getting up there to the end, the beginning of the 3rd round. I think that's going to be a sweet spot. You're going to see a preseason, positive, vibe, a drum roll. He's going to catch a touchdown in the first preseason game, and he's just going to skyrocket all these receivers that are getting drafted, especially in the FFPC format. So Evan Ingram should be getting drafted higher. Like, if you look at some of the guys that got drafted around him, especially in this format, he could do exactly what he did last year. And then you got the 3 guys afterwards and then Freiermuth. I think that is like where the sweet spot of the tight ends are. If you don't get one of those guys, you will probably be, bargain basement guys and hopefully just taking a bunch and figuring out one, but that could also be a headache. So it'll be interesting to see, which tight end is this year's Sam Laporta.
I got something
There's
interesting.
always one.
I was about to say just Pat Freiermuth, who you and me like so, and Nelson Sousa loves. He's been going at the 902, so almost 3 rounds early there for Team 6. And I don't think it's a bad pick because I do like Pat Freiermuth. But
People panic when in these drafts where there's a ton of money on the line. You're talking about $2,000. You're not talking about, $125 or $350. You're talking about $2,000. That's a lot of money. And when people see, guys double tapping tight end, Laporta and Ingram with Kittle and Kincaid, they're looking at all these other teams don't have tight ends too. So if they love Freiermuth, you got to push them up because you're sitting in the middle. There's no real advantage for you to take a guy a little early. You have to push him up if you want him. If he's your guy, you got to get him. So I don't, fault that owner at all for doing what he did. I mean, you can't gamble if that's your last tier break or he's a guy you think could be a top 5 tight end. You have to get him. There's really no, is it really going to hurt you if it doesn't work out? Think about it. Rashee Rice, we all have no idea was going on there. There's reports today it could be a 12-game suspension. I've heard 2, I've heard 3, I've heard none, I've heard 6 or 4. Nobody knows. He's one of the biggest wild cards right now in the game because if he gets 2 or 3, he's one of the best values right now. But if he gets 6, 7, 8, 9, that's 75% of the FFPC regular season. And yeah, it'd be great to have him when it matters, but
people have been saying in the chat, this
7th round TJ Hawkinson, man.
People were saying people were saying that this draft was going
Jordan
by
Love. What?
People were saying this draft was going by the book, right? We've gotten in James Cook has fallen around. We have Rashee Rice moving up a half round. Pat Freiermuth with almost 3 rounds. Nick Chubb's moving up 2.5 rounds. Jordan Love at QB7, 7th round.
God, the 7th round. What is going on?
This draft has taken a turn for the wacky, and that's what we're here for. This is where we get our views from.
We pretty much just said how boring and
no, I was never boring. I'll never give a main event draft a boring. It was by the book.
But what I buy the book, and some people when they see it, if I'm drafted in here from the first 6 rounds, I'm like, oh man, what did I get myself into? But now things are getting a little wacky, and you got to thrive off the wackiness because I just gave that owner positive on Pat Freiermuth. Who I love Pat Freiermuth. I don't mind Jordan Love either, but you're taking Jordan Love over Kyler Murray. Jordan
Love. Let me go look. His ADP has been 912. Earliest he's ever gone in the main event was the 801. So we have had some. This 7th round,
the Nick Chubb
in the 7th round.
Hawkinson, the panic is starting to set in with these guys. It's I understand it's a redraft. This is not a best ball draft. This is a draft where you have to pick guys who start. So they're I got to get my starters. But you're passing up. It's Jalen Warren, 7th round is ridiculous value.
Mostert's been going at
that team. That team is very good too. Puka, Godwin, Ingram, Laporta, Pacheco, Warren, and Richardson. That's a team I'd sign up for, without a doubt.
Just Hawkinson actually, he goes around early. He's still been going in the 8th round of main event.
Someone is going to have to explain that to him.
If I could play devil's advocate, and obviously, as people, longtime viewers know, I'm not on TJ Hawkinson. I think there is a rationale that if you're confident enough in constructing a team, and he has David Njoku already, Hawkinson I'm not saying that. Let's say this owner is confident in their ability. I mean, literally no running backs.
Team 12,
he's confident in his ability to make the team, and he thinks Hawkinson can help him for that $1 million run in the final 3 weeks of the season. But that's interesting because
it's not just
I'm
Hawkinson,
actually hear
Hawkinson
this
and Rice.
I'll give this about Team 5. I want to see what they do the running backs because even with the Hawkinson pick, I think this team could still result depending on where they go as a team that I like. Which is
maybe I'm too hard on the Chubb and Hawkinson owners in every draft.
Chubb was a bit crazy to me at the 7-1.
I just don't. I mean,
because he already has 3 running backs.
Let's just say Hawkinson's back by game 5. He's not going to be ready for the start of the season, and if he is, he's Zeus because there's just no way that's happening. But let's just say he's back by week 5. You still have no certainty whatsoever at the quarterback position. And if you're drafting Hawkinson in the 7th round, that's pretty much you telling me that you believe in Sam Darnold or you believe in J.J. McCarthy because Justin Jefferson ain't going anywhere. Jordan Addison ain't going anywhere. So I don't know.
No, so we've talked a lot about like relative to Kyler, like, oh, CJ Stroud, we've used that as an example. Another guy who hasn't been drafted as an example. You know who I think smart people would agree with me is Patrick Mahomes is probably pretty overvalued. Especially, I mean, wasn't great last year relative to his standards. And Lamar, Anthony Richardson behind him. I feel like Mahomes, it's just the price point. It's not the player. It's the fifth round top 3 quarterback price point. It's more of a you're paying for the name brand, but you're not actually getting name brand quality. They did draft Xavier Worthy. They signed Hollywood Brown.
We do not agree there.
Oh, so
I think Patrick Mahomes is exactly where he should be.
Interesting.
And probably, you know, if I'm going to take, if I don't have AJ Brown, I'm probably not going to take Jalen Hurts in most, you know, in different situations. If he falls to the right spot, yes. Patrick Mahomes, he's right behind Jalen Hurts on my list, you know, right now. I just feel like he's going to have a scorched earth type of year. They finally have receivers. And if Rice figures out a way that is not, you know, miss a ton of games, Kelsey, Brown, Worthy, and if Rice is a couple games, and if just one of those other bozos that, you know, maybe do something, the Sky Moores and the Tonys of the world, like they just maybe catch a couple footballs. I mean, Patrick Mahomes could easily be QB1 this year. He's definitely a guy. I would take Patrick Mahomes over Lamar Jackson almost every time.
Say this, teammate. If you're drafting Tank Dell, despite all the concerns, as your 4th receiver, and then Xavier Worthy is your 5th, sign me up for that. Love Breece Hall. I think he's running back 1 upside and should be going top 5 personally. Love Lamar. DeAndre Swift, for all his issues, is going in the late 6th round, and you get him at the 805. Hell yeah!
No downside.
Hell yeah! That's it. That is it.
And like at the end of the day, with teammate, like, hey, Worthy's pretty much a lottery ticket. Like, you don't know with rookie receivers. Like, yes, Patrick Mahomes, that's great. There's plenty of other guys that had Patrick Mahomes, and it just didn't work out. I like his profile. I think that, you know, he's going to figure it out. He might figure it out right away. But with this draft, he doesn't need him to figure it out right away. And the same thing, you have the anchor with Breece Hall. Now DeAndre Swift, you can just keep pounding the position. Plenty of guys that are coming off here. That this team is there's 3 teams that stand out here to me. And he is team 8 and team 12 are leading the pack for me. There's, you know, the third team is debatable. I like personally what team 9 did. You know, I'm not the biggest Mostert guy, but I could see a path if you know, think they figure it out. But there's a lot of good teams in here, and there's, you know, a lot of teams that outside of team 1. I'm sorry.
And I'll give another hint. He's coming on in the next 10, 15 minutes. We have Team 12 joining us live. For the content, it would have been funnier if you hated his draft, but loving it is also
me and Team 12 have gone back and forth on Twitter over the years. We always have a bet every year on some sort of player take, and I think like I'm realistically 8-1 against him. I think he won 1 because of some fluke injury, but we always went back and forth. We have drafted together. We always have fun going back and forth. But this year, like every draft that I see that he's done, like I can't say anything negative about it. And it really bothers me because I just want to. I was expecting him. I sent him a DM tonight. I was like, I can't wait to rip your team. I know you're going to do something that's going to really bother me. And you haven't done it yet. I'm hoping you're like, and there's something coming. There's still a player that's on this board right now that if all things fall correctly, I mean, he's going to be doing backflips, you know, up and down the road because I don't like these rounds are getting a little wacky.
Rounds are getting wacky. Chad also is highlighting, at least I saw a couple that they're liking Team 10. I'm looking at them. I think they're having a pretty good draft as well. I mean, we talked about, I think you mentioned them.
I said team 9. I meant team 10.
Yeah. Team 10 is team 9 is not terrible. A lot of good drafts.
The double tap of the tight end this year is definitely, I said this on the last stream we did on Tuesday.
I like
something that I'm experimenting more. If I'm doing it, I'm doing it with Freiermuth up. Like I'm taking, you know, Andrews and Freiermuth or Laporta and Ingram. Like I'm doing it like I've done a lot of Pitts Laporta or Pitts. You know, one team we did was Pitts, Njoku. I forget the other guy. Just mix it up to different formats. I don't think I'll ever get to the point in the main event that I'll be double tapping the early tight ends. I just think that's too risky because to me, they're kind of all the same. Obviously, I like guys more than the other. But like to me, like I'm not going to start my team with Laporte or Kelsey. It's just not something. To me, there's other guys that I just like a lot more. And geez, man, this is wild. And exactly what I said. Now, I mean, I'm not going to say it until he drafts, but based off what I'm seeing, he's going to get the player that I'm talking about. I don't see any other reason why he wouldn't. And he's probably got to be doing backflips. There's just no way he doesn't take the player. He's too smart.
We're gonna let Team 12 make their next 2 picks, and then we'll bring him on because I see him in the studio. So he'll be on in a second. Also a little surprised because he got all this early steam. I remember we talked about him on the Hardway draft. And I feel like that steam has stopped like instantly because Jameson Williams hasn't budged. If anything, I think I've seen
real
him fall,
quiet,
which is I don't know what to make of because I bought in very quickly and it feels as though the stock I bought in has kind of.
I'm still buying into the stock. The stock is still exactly where I want it to be. I'm going to be drafting him a ton. Nothing that I've seen that would tell me anything different. Like there's nobody else there. Like. If you want to mix in a Khalif Raymond later or Donovan Peoples-Jones, okay, get cute with it. But at the end of the day, Jameson Williams is still the guy, behind St. Brown, behind Laporta, which is fine. He's not going to catch 100 passes. Don't expect that. But he's a guy that if you can get him healthy and not on Dan Campbell's bad side, he's a guy that I would love as my wide receiver 4 going into a shootout. I'll take my chances. He's like that absolute boom bust guy. And with a player like that, man, I mean, he could a 4 for 150 and 2 touchdowns. That could really separate you. Please take him. 2 picks here. He's got to take him. He without a doubt. There's no. I would be shocked if he doesn't take him.
I will say, we're about to bring Team 12 on. I will say Team 10. I'm loving those running backs. I love, especially after Pacheco, love Warren, Brooks, and Corum for the upside. Receivers are starting to scare me a bit, but you have those 2 tight ends, and it's also that
on cue, just right on cue, like literally doing backflips. Like,
2 picks. Let's bring him on. Team 12 himself,
man. This is just tickling me.
An analyst for Player Profiler. He's been on our show many times. We love having him on. Dan Williamson, ladies and gentlemen. Sir, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Hell of a draft.
You've been hearing all the nice things I've been saying about you.
1 or 2, yes, I have heard them. So I don't know how to feel about that, Terp. I mean, you and I are usually going opposite. So
I was doing backflips for you, and Kyler Murray just keep all the way back to you. Like, what are we doing here? 7th round Jordan Love versus 10th round Kyler Murray.
Yeah, that was sweet. I was really hoping that Singletary or Ford would drop to me though. So, oh well.
We have to ask, this draft felt like for about the first 6 rounds was, pretty standard following ADP, and then 7th round hits, and the last 3 rounds have been nutty. How do you adjust? Again, first main event live draft of the year, you kind of have, again, the standard draft, nothing too crazy, and then kind of shit hits the fan and it's all over. How do you adjust kind of your strategy to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really worry about what other people are doing. I'm just looking for the values for me, and whatever they want to do. If somebody wants to take someone 3 rounds ahead of ADP or something like that, go right ahead. It's just pushing value down to me. I'm just going to take what's there and just keep chugging along on my own.
Any picks that your surprise fell to you? I mean, we love your draft so far. Sometimes guests come on and say, it's okay. We should ask you, how are you feeling about this draft so far? Because again, we love it. So I want to hear if you feel the same.
I feel pretty good about it. Again, I'd have felt a lot better if I could have gotten Ford or Singletary on there, just gotten that 3rd starting running back that I feel really, really good about on my team. But, I'm totally fine with starting out with White and Gibbs and then just adding in some guys who should fall into some work later in the year.
The Devontae Smith pick, was there any, me and Turp briefly talked about it. Was there any concern when you were coming around that team 11 right before you might try and just go with the tri-eagle stack there to start? Or was Devontae Smith, were you hoping he fell to you? Or was that just kind of like, you were playing the board and he just happened to be the pick?
Yeah, I was mostly playing the board, hoping a little bit that he fell to me because I felt like he was the best player left. Once like Nico Collins went off, I felt like Pitts and Smith were kind of the picks there, though I did consider Diggs as well. He would have been a reach, but when you're sitting in the 12 hole,
there's really no such thing as a reach.
Exactly. I mean, it's going to be 24 picks till it comes back to you. So he's definitely not coming back to me. I gotta say though, man, Team 8 is just absolutely killing it.
Exceptional draft.
Yeah, it really is. HKF, I'm guessing that's Hong Kong Fooey, but hard to say. Anyway, he's a really good drafter if that's who it is. I didn't even look to see who I was drafting against tonight. So, but he's had value after value fall to him, and he's taken very good advantage.
I saw you had a tweet about Stefon Diggs that I wanted to talk to you about, or his player profiler had a kind of a quote tweet, and me and Terp talked about it early on, as in like 2 months ago when me and Terp discussed it. Terp was saying how with the Texans receivers, he's just taking the kind of, the cheapest value, which at the time was Tank Dell. That's changed. He's on Collins now. But you had a kind of a quote that was, you think Stefon Diggs has one more elite year left in him, which I agree with. I think Diggs is going to have a really good year, and he's going to be the best Texans receiver of the bunch. But I was wondering if you could elaborate more on why you kind of said that. Like, what's the reasoning behind Diggs having that elite year and being a good value in the 4th round?
Yeah, I think Diggs still has something left in the tank. I think the end of last year was really more due to his offensive coordinator. Josh Allen was just misfiring on a lot of passes to him. I mean, there were a lot of times where he was getting targets and the ball just really was, maybe in the same zip code, but certainly not very catchable. And so, and also Diggs, once he pouts his way out of one town, boy, when he gets into the next town, he's ready to go, and he's got to prove to everybody that he's, still the greatest wide receiver ever. And, I like betting on egos like that they can just like will themselves into another good year, like Terrell Owens, Steve Smith, those kind of guys. I think Diggs, he's got that dog in him. And
he wants his next paycheck.
Exactly. And when he's got CJ Stroud throwing him the ball, and that they brought him over for a reason. They know what they bought when they brought in Diggs. They know he's going to demand the ball. If they're not ready to give him the ball and feed him the ball, so everything's going to be in place. The only thing is, if he's done or washed or whatever, okay, then all bets are off. But I just don't think that's the case.
Dan, I wanted to ask you about JSN, and had a bit of a disappointing rookie year, and how much of that can be attributed to, the offense, the scheme, had injuries in the preseason, broke his wrist, which slowed him down. Take him at the 801 here. I just wanted to hear your thoughts. He's your 5th receiver, which is probably a great 5th receiver dart throw to have, which is a top 20 drafted receiver 2 years ago, extremely talented at Ohio State, but, just a little bit of a slow rookie year, had some really good moments. But what do you make of that Seahawks offense as a whole with a new coaching staff, and specifically if you could elaborate on the JSN pick? And I know you're coming up, so please feel free to pause whenever your pick comes about.
Okay. Yeah, I find that, JSN, as you said, had a really tough rookie year, but he also had an offensive coordinator that I don't think was really using him very well. I have much more faith that Ryan Grubb is going to take what he's got and use it better and figure out how to use the pieces of this offense correctly. So I'm all right. Let's see. I gotta make a pick here. So
we're live in the draft room. Please take it away.
A lot of pressure going on right now.
Yeah, not too bad. We've got some.
If you really want to make Aiden happy, just take Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah. So, spoiler alert, that is not going to happen. At least certainly not this round.
Devastating.
Yeah, I know. So I'm just going to grab at a couple of. I think I'm going to go a couple running backs here and just take 2 guys I think have a decent chance to be pitching in pretty well.
Now
that would have been my guess. See if I can get the second one right. That also would have been my guess.
All right.
Finish your thought about JSN and Ryan Grubb, and then
I have a follow-up question too.
Terp will have a question about those 2 running backs. So just real quick, if you could just finish the Ryan Grubb, JSN, and the Seahawks offense.
Yeah, so I think, Lockett, great player, but probably more on the way down than on the way up. JSN kind of, should be the rising star here. They've still got the same GM in place who made that pick. I'm sure he wants to see JSN succeed, so it's not like a complete new regime. It's just a new coaching staff. And honestly, Shane Waldron is somebody that I'm a little bit indifferent on as far as their ability to coordinate an offense, or at least coordinate it in a way that makes fantasy players happy. So that might be the better way to put it.
My follow-up question is on the same topic. We saw last year with Shane Waldron with JSN, and a popular subject that's been coming up on the player profile streets is Roma Duze this year. We know who his offensive coordinator is. What is different? I'm not saying I don't like the player. But with those two, obviously people are going to say, well, Keenan Allen can get hurt. Obviously, we know that. That's all part of the range of possibilities. And you would love to have a Roma Duze ticket when you're chasing $1 million. Fine. But what makes that any different than the JSN situation from last year?
Yeah, that's my biggest concern with Odunze. Otherwise, I would be drafting a lot more of them than I am. Though I did like the value here. Honestly, if JSN had gone, either JSN or Watson, I probably would have taken Odunze on that turn, on the 7-8 turn. And then, of course, just, to show what teammate is doing and how, just they must be living right somehow, because they get them all the way, almost towards the end of round 9. So they were able to take a running back with Swift, and then Odunze is still sitting there at the end of round 9. I mean, he's wide receiver 47 here. At that point, that's, you just want to take that.
At that point, I agree.
Yeah, bet on the talent.
You're betting on the talent. It's just what's different than, obviously if you're going to get him at wide receiver 47, it's a good value. I'm not going to ever say it's not, but people that are trying to say and push him up higher, and I think he's a player that could get pushed up higher with a preseason pop, with some good press that comes out. And I don't see what's any different than what happened last year in Seattle. Quarterback, you can say, well, Caleb Williams is better than Geno Smith. And we don't know that. We have no clue. And we don't know what Shane Waldron is. Is he going to change the offense? He couldn't get it done in Seattle, so he got a job in Chicago, and we know what that disaster was last year. Coaching staff still the same. And I'm not saying I love Roma Duze as a player. Love watching him in college. But, DeAndre Swift's going to catch passes. Cole Kmet's not going anywhere. And is Caleb Williams just going to throw the ball 40 times a game, 35 times a game as a rookie quarterback? I mean, I don't see it in Chicago. Like, we're not talking about like in Detroit, like in a dome or something like that. We're talking about, I don't know. He's just a player that he's, to me, more of a best ball player, or a guy that you're just drafting if you have 4 or 5 solid receivers already and you can get him at the value that he got him at, and then just store him on your bench until maybe something happens or he gets it figured out in the NFL. He could be a lottery ticket that win you $1 million, but you got to get there first. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of Roma Duze on guys' bench that took him too early as their wide receiver 3 or 4.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, where a teammate took him was certainly the perfect spot, because he already had 5 wide receivers in the house, and so he was, he's basically playing with house money there. Being able to pick that receiver pick is a luxury. I mean, who knows if he'll even make another receiver pick the rest of the way through. He certainly doesn't need to if he doesn't want to.
Dan, I got to ask you, and we had you on. This is the last question I'll ask you, and we'll let you go because this draft is flying by. We'll let you go for the final 6 rounds. But I have to ask real quick, because you drafted him. We had you on for a best ball tournament. You might have even answered it then. But Ty Chandler in the 11th round, resident Vikings fans. Aaron Jones was hurt 4 times last year, 4 separate occasions. Gotta like Ty Chandler's value that he's going to have a role at least like 3 or 4 weeks this year.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think he's probably going to be pitching in and getting a few touches every week. So he might have some standalone value. It's hard to say. I do know the team's very high on him, not only the coaching staff, but also the players. They were making a lot of noise in minicamp about how good he looked, and how excited they were to have him on the team. And they were talking about, hey, we got 2 starting running backs, and you can only go so far with that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, I mean, you'd rather hear that than what Tank Bigsby was hearing said about him. So I'll take the the good news on Chandler, and he was a player I've liked since he came out of college, so it's an easy pick for me.
Dan Williamson, ladies and gentlemen, drafting out of the 12th spot today. You can find all of his work at playerprofiler.com and at Twitter at overhypesleeper. Dan, thanks again. Good luck with the rest of the draft.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. A lot of fun.
Talk to you soon, brother. Good luck.
Terp, this draft is flying. I feel like the last three coverages we've done have been sub like an hour 15. Absolutely absurd.
It's crazy because we do have pros versus Joes coming up, and we do know we're going to be sitting in this chair for a long time. Don't move.
I mean, again, I said it makes sense. If you're drafting on July 5th, the earliest FFPC has ever held main event live drafts, you probably know what you're doing, and you can.
I guess you got like a lot of guys who have a lot of experience badges in this. I don't
for sure
see that, but sure. I bet most of these guys know what they're doing. I mean, you might have one or two that are like, oh, I can be part of the first live draft. That's cool, but you're spending a lot of money, so it's the 8 and 12 to me. I mean. Dan is my friend, somebody that I talk to outside of here. And usually I rip his teams because he said we don't usually agree, but his draft's outstanding right now. We didn't even talk about Christian Watson yet. And Hollywood Brown, double Falcons, who we know I love this year. Everybody loves them, but still, I mean, you got Pitts, you got London. I mean, we didn't talk about it all. Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy we haven't talked about at all. Really in these drafts, and he could easily be running back one this year. That's in the range of possibilities, and you're getting him as your anchor. There's really nothing to dislike about that team.
I gotta admit, a team we haven't talked to. I think honestly, there's been a lot of solid drafts, and I also feel as though the main event more than anything. Clyde, just crazy.
Looking at it from the outside,
I just want to say
you're sitting here watching. Running backs are flying in these rounds.
I'll say this.
It's good to know because I thought it would be a little opposite. I mean, he's just continues to just Hubbard is to me as a people are trashing him, saying, "Oh yeah, Jonathan Brooks that, Jonathan Brooks this." Like,
dude, you got to chill. We're gonna get accusations. Oh, just because Dan came on the show and Torp's being all nice to him.
What I've said all the same things on shows before without Dan. Like, I think Hubbard right now is like. I'm not sitting here saying he's a league winner, but he's a guy that for the first 5-6 weeks of the season could be your running back too. And if you're stacked everywhere else, like you saw last year, he put up some numbers. Is he a superstar? No, but you don't need a superstar as your running back too. And if you can get if Bryce Young improves and, obviously a new coach coming from Tampa Bay, you think he gets the offense a little bit better. I don't know, man. I mean, I just feel like, in the 13th round, you could do much worse than Chuba Hubbard.
I'll say this. Some of the drafts I see when we do a best ball term or fantasy pros, I can honestly sit here and say, I don't know what that drafter is thinking. Respect to them, but there's no rationale behind it. The main event, for the most part, I may disagree with picks because of my philosophy or my feelings on that player. Every drafter here, I can at least play devil's advocate and see why they're doing what they're doing. So and I respect that. So there's some drafts here that I don't agree with, but that's just me. I'm not going to sit and say it's a bad draft.
You could paint a picture. Philosophy. I mean, I'll say it's a bad draft because that's just, what I do. And most of the time I'm wrong. Not really, but I'm still going to have fun with it. I don't mean any harm saying your team is, not very good, but some of the picks and where they're being picked, it's just like, it's not for me. And that's just, what I see. But like I said, you could paint a picture for almost anything. Any draft you look at in these main events, some of the teams that have won $1 million and have won the big prizes that are offered throughout the years, you look back at their drafts and you're just like, wow, I see how this guy got there and that guy got there, but there's so much more to these leagues than just your draft, grinding fab and
waivers,
making the right roster moves every week and starting the right guys and
Fab is
breaking
so
your
big.
way.
Fab is massive.
The best teams and the best things are the ones that grind fab. It's time consuming. It's a lot. There's a lot of information out there, but teams that grab fab and get the guy a week early or 2 weeks early before they got to spend $999. Like you see some of these wacky bids that go out. It's look at the guy who won it last year. Yeah, Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, yeah, at the end of the season, we came back, but he missed most of the season. Like, if you look at his team, him drafted, people would have bet their life that he never would have won $1 million. But he grinded all year. He made the right late round picks. They worked out. He had a lot of luck on his side during the season. And you need that. But once you get to the shootout, his team was just in perfect shape.
Yeah. I mean, Jaden Reed, like, sometimes you can't point out what player.
No.
It was the only player left on Sunday night was actually, he might have had Jefferson too. He had Jefferson and Jaden, but Jaden Reed won him the $1 million. Like, it was over after halftime. Team 9 is in our chat room, Iron Daddy. Respect for being in the chat room and drafting. That is a multitasking that I couldn't even fathom doing, but all respect to you. I'm just going to say, having a very good draft, and I'm intrigued if he could share in the chat. Really like the receiver room. You have your stud tight end in Kelsey and stud quarterback in Josh Allen. It's just, I feel like, running backs, but this is where in the main event, or if you're playing the Fantasy Pros Championship, could you feel maybe more confident, Turpinowski, if you were in his spot with those running backs, older side, great, some of them coming off great years, but injury/age concerns with a lot of them, but knowing that you have fab and you can pick up running backs come out of nowhere each year. All you maybe need is 1 or 2 to be solid to start, and then you kind of work fab and kind of fill it out throughout the rest of the year.
I like his team. The running back room scares me. I just, like you said, I like some of the players. I think James Conner is undervalued in drafts. But, obviously he's getting up there in age, injury risk, but he's going to get a ton of carries until the wheels fall off. Mostert, it is just a question to me this year. I mean, do we think it's going to be just like it was last year? They drafted Jalen Wright. They're telling you it's not going to be. Devin Achane is going 3 rounds higher. Clearly a more explosive back. Mostert's getting up there a little bit in age. They gave him a little bit of a raise, but it's just a 1-year type of deal. Singletary, we talked off stream. The Giants backfield is one of the most difficult to figure out this year in fantasy football. Everybody knows Devin Singletary is going to be the guy, but do we really think he's going to be the guy all year? Somebody's going to emerge there, whether it's Tracy, whether it's Gray, whether they add somebody, and then Zeke. I like Zeke. I never said that once in a really long time. But he's going to get you enough that he's not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
The thing with Zeke is, do we think he's going to hold up for 17 games and he's going to get to a point where if you make it to the shootout, he's going to be the guy? I could see him getting more 6-point weeks than 20-point weeks. If I'm that drafter, I would have drafted a little more upside to position. He's only drafted 4 running backs through 15 rounds, 14 rounds. 14
rounds, yeah.
And I don't know, like Adam Thielen.
I'll say this. It's one of those teams that it's going to require, maybe, in my opinion, a little bit more work in season. But if he does that and he hits on some pickups, free agent pickups in the season, those running backs, to me, just need to kind of keep him afloat for the first couple of weeks, because then running back targets will emerge who aren't
great receiver room.
Love Pop
best
Douglas
quarterback,
too.
But in some people's eyes, best tight end. You really can't. It's just the running backs. Like, if I'm him, and he just drafts defense.
I love. I mean, but then we talked about.
I would literally draft a running back every single pick the rest of the way.
We talked about
defense kicker.
Value Justin Jefferson. You love Nico Collins. We talked about Christian Kirk before.
Christian Kirk's one of my favorite players to draft this year.
It's a really good receiver room, and honestly, and then like Thielen, 100 catches last year.
But the thing with Thielen is, how many times is Thielen going to crack your roster?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those. Who am I taking? Like Jaleel McLaughlin would have been a pick. I think I'm taking over him. Maybe Ray Davis.
There's a bunch of guys in there that, Rico, Dobbins. I don't know exactly which way we're going, but you go on the list of Chubba Hubbard, Gibson. Yeah, I always get screwed up by that, especially upside and Bucky Irving, upside and Braylon Allen if something happens. Like, I just feel like that he needs to take more shots with young, potential, and fill out his room, because he shouldn't draft another receiver.
Yeah,
his receivers are very, very good. His tight end very good, quarterback very good. I would just load. I think he got caught up a little bit, with running backs, and it could be the downfall of a really good, roster besides that.
Iron Daddy, if you still are in the chat, let us know how you're feeling about your running back room. And I've known people who are high on these guys and think that the age cliff it's discounting them to a point where it's great value. I mean, because James Conner was great. I mean, trying to explain fantasy football to someone who's not as familiar or is a bit more of a casual, how Raheem Mostert isn't like a top 3 pick is crazy. Dude coming off a 20
it really is.
season.
Like, if you ever have a conversation with people and they're like, wait, why is Kyron Williams not like the 3rd pick overall?
This is like your home league, right? Like your home league guys
like,
who just casually follow football. They do it. They throw their $50 into the league. Raheem Mostert might be like a 4th or 5th round pick to them. And they're like, why is he going in the 5th? He's going in the 7th here in FFPC.
You can't say anything. You can't say any better than that. Like, it's just, you look at some of these guys and you're having conversations, friends, family who just play in that 1-2 league, or they're like, wow, I can get Raheem Mostert there. Like, there's a reason why you're getting him there. And I'm not trashing Raheem Mostert. Not really the biggest fan of him this year, but still, I mean, if he does what he did last year, he's going to kill me just like he did last year. So I hope that's not the case, but you got to take stands somewhere, and he will be one of mine.
I just wanted to say it's interesting to me. I lost it. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. So team 6 took Jameson Williams, who we mentioned. We were saying with team 6, like how J-Mo, he was having that rise very early on in early OTAs, and it kind of stalled out. Jaleel McLaughlin's the same. I thought that ADP was going to keep rising, and it's kind of sputtered out. I'm still loving him as a 12th round value.
Sign me up.
All over Javonte Williams. I'm still really surprised at the 2-round difference. People could be adjusting for Javonte Williams is now well removed from the ACL surgery and maybe could get back to that pre-injury form. But Sean Payton does not seem to be a fan. McLaughlin I think this is Najee and Jalen Warren 2.0. So
there's a lot of guys, and they like Watson. They like the rookie out of Notre Dame. I mean, there's Samaje P. Ryan who's still there. Like, there's 5 guys who are very ugly, and I'm not going to be the one to take a Javonte Williams, in round. Where did he go?
Went in the 9th.
Yeah, no thanks. Not there. I mean, there's plenty of guys around him that I like just a ton more that present way more upside. And I know everybody's going to be like, well, Sean Payton and Alvin Kamara, remember that? Yeah, but that's not Javonte Williams. It's going to be Jaleel McLaughlin. He's the guy that I'm targeting.
Or Blake Watson. Blake Watson's
the guy that perfect pick for Team 9.
Yeah. Blake Watson is the guy who I heard about all the positive press, and you haven't heard anything since, but Nothing. That's kind of lodged in my memory. That's lodged there. Well, let me turn to there was some that I wanted to talk about. Oh, this is just a personal thing. We talked about it before. We don't need to get into it, but love Jonnu Smith in the 16th. I think it's a possible league winner right there and could really serve you. I think he's used well.
Is he a sexy pick? No. But when it comes to a player like that, like, he's a guy that, God forbid something happens to your top tight end, he could get you 2 to 3 weeks of not burying you at the position, because the tight end position, we know every year there's always the Evan Ingram. There's a Sam Laporta, the guy that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys down here that have the profile that could be that guy. I don't think Smith's one of them. But that doesn't mean he can't be a Tyler Conklin type of guy, who's a guy that, is he going to get you 20, 25, 30 points? No. But he's a guy that, if you have an injury or a guy you need to, get you 2-3 weeks in a very, very good offense when everybody's worrying about everybody else, Smith could be a guy that's tricky that can get you, 5 for 50 and a touchdown in a couple weeks. And, from a pick where he's going, in the 16th round as your backup tight end, nothing wrong with that at all.
We talked, obviously, before the show, we talked about it on previous shows, but I mean, it's the quarterback's kind of value is already depressed as is. They're getting pushed down the board. And it's almost a little jarring in some ways to see how also deep it is. And you're seeing guys like Trevor Lawrence go in the 17th round of a main event draft, when Trevor Lawrence, I'm actually very confident saying, is going to win people some weeks. But
last year, where'd he go? 5th round? He got pushed by the time.
6th, I would say.
Okay.
I don't think sometimes the 5th for sure. I'm not saying I don't remember off the top of my head, but on average, I would probably say 6th.
It's crazy because the player is still
he was what
did
CJ Stroud is this year, right? Like,
did
where
they
CJ
really get
Stroud's
worse? Like, people were like, well, they lost Calvin Ridley, but did they really get worse? Like, Brian Thomas is an exciting rookie, a guy that could be a league winner where he's getting drafted. Yeah, Gabe Davis is not setting the world on fire. We know that. But Christian Kirk's healthy. We saw what Christian Kirk did, with Lawrence when he was the guy. Yeah, is Christian Kirk an elite wide receiver in the NFL? No, but we don't need that. He could easily be a, very, very good player for your fantasy team. And we've talked about Evan Ingram. He might be the guy we've talked about more on this show than anything.
He's up
and
there.
There's also a name. There's also a name that is deep on the Jaguars, Parker Washington, that got a little press in early camps, and we know that stuff doesn't always mean anything, but
Sometimes
just another name to watch. It's another
just another
name to watch. It's a guy that we all know Gabe Davis isn't a guy that's going to be out there all the time. And Christian Kirk's been hurt. Evan Ingram's been hurt. Brian Thomas, we don't know that. We don't know what's going on there. And it's definitely a name to just pay attention to. Not saying he's going to be a league winner, but pay attention.
I know, we've been talking about him a lot. What can you do? But man, teammate Xavier Legette, Troy Franklin, those are exactly the type of dart throws I want to see a team take in the final 5 rounds of a draft. Just 2 rookies. Obviously, Legette got, first round capital, and Troy Franklin kind of went into a situation where competition for targets may not be there and has a relationship with Bo Nix. Love those 2 picks.
My only fear with Team 8 is the tight end room. And,
Schultz and Komet. I know I don't have the full board up, but Schultz and Komet are their only tight ends right now.
There's other guys here coming up. I don't know what his roster. It looks like there's 3 rounds left.
Yep.
He's got to get a kicker in a defense. There's other there's some upside tight ends that haven't been drafted yet that are deep and could be complete duds, but are worth looking at to just maybe get a little bit of a up-and-comer possibly. One of them just went. So Jelani Woods would have looked good on that team. Just as a third guy, a third, chance, third lottery ticket at the position, because that team's very good. It's second on my list behind Team 12, but both those teams are neck and neck to me. I mean, there's a lot to like on both.
I wanted to ask you about, I lost where he was. He went at the 1607. Keaton Mitchell, I know Derrick Henry's there, but I always go back to Derrick Henry's age, ton of carries. There is eventually going to be a little bit of breakdown. Who knows it's going to be that year. Keaton Mitchell's coming off the ACL. This is a guy personally, a different type of dart throw, but I am really liking the idea for any team of drafting Keaton Mitchell in any of the final 5 rounds, comfortably stashing him on your bench, because I think that could reap rewards.
But can you do that? That's the thing about it.
That's what I was going to. That's what I was getting to. Like, I think, can you comfortably? Depends on how your team does, right? If your team starts
roster construction is so important in these. Like,
where would Keaton Mitchell have gone if he didn't get hurt? Do you think? Let's say they signed Derrick Henry still, but Keaton Mitchell.
He was 100%. He's probably in the Ty Chandler, Kendrick Miller range.
11-12, because the idea of, not the idea of Keaton Mitchell from what we saw, it really came on the scene and kind of exploded.
I kind of like Justice Hill better, just
because of the injury.
Just because of the injury, and like they're very familiar with. He's very familiar with that offense. And is he a guy that's good? It's a sexy pick, no, but Derrick Henry, he's getting up there, and he's a lot of wear and tear on that body, and they're not giving him 100% of the carries. He's gonna get mixed. There's other guys that are gonna get mixed in, and we all know that Mitchell's not gonna be ready for the start of the season. The coaches have not given you any ray of light that says he's going to be ready. So if you're gambling, I understand why you would gamble on Keaton Mitchell, but most of the time in a shorter regular season, when you have to be a top 2 seed or win your league to get in. There's no other magical thing to get in. So Hill might be a guy that something happens early in the season, he might be worth a 20th round draft pick, a 19th round draft pick, and just instead of blowing all your fab on him, because we all know that there's somebody that's going to be spending a ton of money that is probably going to get you most of the time.
I don't want to phrase it like it's a mistake, but do you think in this main event drafts, or even the fantasy pros to a degree, that people think too much into that stretch run for the $1 million weeks 15, 16, and 17 while drafting, and don't focus enough on I have to get there in the first place?
Yes, I mean it really comes down to like I said, how many teams do you have? Some teams you can take gambles on. It's all about like obviously you need a lot of things to go your way. Injuries, you need the right roster construction, you need the right player. Let's just call it picking the right players is very important in these. Like everybody can sit here and be like, oh wow, roster construction this. But if you don't pick the right players, you're not going to win. I don't care how good you are everywhere else. It's just you're going to lose. But when you see like guys like Jonathan Brooks, and I always go back to Jonathan Brooks. I know you don't like when I talk about Jonathan Brooks, but like, does Jonathan Brooks have potential to be a league winner? A guy that's going to win you $1 million? Yes, he does. He's a very, very talented player, but he's also a very talented player that's coming off a major injury on a team that is going to be very, very suspect. I don't see a path where even when he's on it comes back, that he's ever going to be 100% guy or 80% guy or 70% guy. I see there being a timeshare with somebody else. I mean, I just don't. If they're not a good team or they're not anywhere close to the playoff run, why would they put their asset, who they love so much, out there and just run them into the ground when they're not playing for anything? So and he's going to where you have to spend for him. Like if you're drafting a guy like these rookies that are getting drafted here, Xavier Legette, Franklin, they're not hurting you in any way. If they don't get it done, or you just cut them. But Jonathan Brooks, you're always going to be like telling yourself the story like he's coming. But when he's coming, you could be watching the games with nothing, playing for nothing because your team's out of it.
A guy that I believe, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've ever talked about him on show, but I believe you're a fan of Luke McCaffrey, 18th round. If I'm remembering correctly, which I think I am, you're a fan of his as a late round dart throw.
Very much.
Explain why.
I mean, I love Jaden Daniels this year. I like Kingsbury in that offense. I really like the Commanders, Redskins, whatever you want to call them, this year to really take the next step and be better than they've been over the past. Jahan Dotson last year was very disappointing, but with Jahan Dotson, he played almost every snap. He didn't do much, but he was out there a ton. Luke McCaffrey, early on, you've been hearing them moving him around, doing different things with him, getting him the ball, handing him the ball, like different things that you like hearing for a guy that's getting drafted in the 18th, 19th round, who's pretty much free in all drafts. Is Luke McCaffrey going to set the world on fire day one? Probably not. But is there a world where you could see him being, a knockoff Puka Nacua this year? I think it's in the range of possibilities if Jaden Daniels is that good. I mean, that offense is going to be buzzing. I mean, their receivers are going to be very, very good. And Brian Robinson is a guy that Thomas just said in the chat. He's a guy that, hasn't been talked about in any of these drafts so far. And he's a guy that I'll be drafting a lot too, because I feel like he's clear cut. I think Eckler's just complete dust. But back to McCaffrey, I mean, he's a guy that if you're taking shots in these last rounds, why not? Because what happens if Luke McCaffrey goes 4 for 60 and a touchdown on week one? What's he getting spent on fab? Everybody panics week one. He's going to go for much more than he should, and then what? I mean, he's going to be a tough guy to start all the time, but like maybe he passes Dotson, and maybe Jaden Daniels is buzzing, and things are, balls flying around with Cliff Kingsbury. I like Luke McCaffrey a lot this year. He's a guy that'll be on a lot of my teams.
Look at the last 5 rounds, or even more. Let's go from round 15 on. The answer, in my genuine opinion, it's the no fun answer. I don't think there is a Puka Nacua. I think that's a once every 5 years type occurrence. A guy who
there's
at one point is.
There's definitely some guys who are in the possibility.
Yes, but in terms of a guy going from at some points undrafted to 16th round to maybe getting into the 13th, 14th and ending up the next year as a first round pick, very rare. If we're planting a flag on one guy drafted in round 15 tonight or later, who will be going as a top 2 round player next year, who would you bank it on? I like right now, I think I'm actually going Troy Franklin.
No, I mean, I could see that's definitely a story you could tell yourself.
I was going to say AD Mitchell. I just don't know if that's a passing offense. It's going to do it. I don't
and
know if the
that's
Broncos
kinda-
have enough offense either, but maybe
So
I just like
I'll
Troy
give you.
Franklin.
I'll give you 2 names. One is Wan'Dale Robinson, and the other one is a guy that I've been targeting a ton. If Drake May's that guy, it's Javon Baker. I mean, he's a guy who I love
has he
coming
been
out of the
drafted?
draft. I
Has he
don't
been
believe
drafted?
so.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
somebody on that New England room from a receiver position is going to win people a ton of money because they're free in drafts. They're never not going to be free in drafts. There's never a world where Polk or Baker or any of those other guys are getting moved up to the 9th, 10th run. It's not happening, no matter what they do in the preseason. And that's what you love to try to exploit in these drafts because, you have 5-6 receivers already. Why not? Why not take a shot? So, to me, it's Javon Baker. I also like Wan'Dale Robinson a ton.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said. Granted, if we asked this question last year, no one would have said Puka Nacua as a first-round pick, but that's why. I think Troy Frank could have the opportunity. Last question, as this draft is already done, hour 10. Hell yeah, boys. That was freaking crazy. First main event draft, live draft of the year, and it's done in, 70 minutes, 71 minutes? Very impressive. But question in the chat for you. Let's go all the way back to round 1. Derek Greer just asked before we go, is CD appears like he might be holding out? Any concern for you? Thoughts? Dak, by the way, was hurt. We were right. We were right about that on Tuesday.
Who knows what's going on in Dallas? Like, literally, if you're a Cowboys fan, you have no clue what's going on. Like, go through their roster right now. Parsons don't seem happy. CD's not happy. Dak hasn't got paid. CD hasn't got paid. They brought back Zeke. They really have done nothing in the offseason. Like, what? You just saw Dak in a walking boot on a boat the other day. Like, what gets you excited? I mean, is CD going to hold out? I don't see that being possible. But what is Dallas doing? Like, how do you not pay 1, 2, both of them? Like, if Dak Prescott goes and balls out again, he's going to be the highest paid quarterback in football. He's going to be ridiculous contract. CD should get paid. He should get paid right below what Justin Jefferson got paid. Like, what else need you to see? I mean,
it's got to be nice that your GM's Howie Roseman there, Terp, and he's always first to the extensions. And
I'm very excited. He's my GM. I mean, I'm always going to sit here and love to watch Dallas misery, except when it comes to fantasy football. We've talked about it on these shows. I don't wish any harm on any player ever. Never want it to happen. But when you have a guy like, Dak, and you see him in a boot, that has you worried. CD saying he's going to hold out, also a worry. So it's rather interesting what's going on in Dallas right now. They're always a sideshow. We'll see what happens.
That's going to do it for us. First main event live draft coverage of the year. A complete success. Really good draft. Again, thank you to the 12 drafters who jumped into a main event live draft on
No
July
fear whatsoever
5th.
Doing this.
Thank you again to Dan Williamson for popping on. Thank you to the chat, as always. I will be back on Tuesday. Terp is on vacation. I'll be back on Tuesday with player profiles Bradley Stalder to cover Fantasy Pros Championship. I believe like 6-7 spots still remain in that. If you want to sign up, it's listed as live on FFPC YouTube at myffpc.com. Main event live drafts are open. You can sign up now, compete for the $1 million.
We will be doing definitely a bunch more of these by the time we get to live drafts in Vegas. I mean, I don't think it'll be a weekly thing, but it'll definitely be a every couple week thing just to see how these boards fall out, because what they look like now is not what they're going to look like in a month from now. They're going to be, flipped in a lot of spots. You're going to see a lot of training camp things happening. It's going to be wild.
That is going to do it for us. We will see you guys Tuesday night. For myself, Adam Corey, Dave Tripoli. Have a good night, guys, and happy holiday.